County. We've got a vehicle running from us.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? From deputies on patrol, what it's like to work in corrections, dig into some cold case investigations, and reveal the multitude of untold stories of how our officers give back to the community. All stories from your neighbors, the hard-working men and women who serve the citizens of York County.
I can back 144 on 5.
This is YCSO Behind the Badge, the official podcast of the York County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Badge, the official podcast of the York County Sheriff's Office. I'm Trent Ferris, Public Information Officer for the York County Sheriff's Office, and your host. Before we move on, please go check us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And YouTube is where you can also listen to this podcast on a video cast if you don't have a podcasting service. Lastly, sign up today for those Notify Me alerts straight to your phone and email at yorkcountysheriff.com. And real quick, just to let you know, when we do send out Notify Me alerts, we can send them directly to your community when a major event happens in our county, directly into your area. Today's podcast may be a tough one for you to hear, and especially for a tough one for our guests to remember and recall today. But 28 years ago today, the recording of this podcast is September 25th. On a Friday night, the York County Sheriff's Office lost one of its own. Deputy James Brent McCants was killed in the line of duty after a traffic stop on Dave Lyle Blvd in Rock Hill, right there in the Manchester shopping area where that is today. So when you're driving through there, you also see that there's signs on Dave Lyle Blvd saying the Deputy James Brent McCants Memorial Highway. So now you know what we're going to be talking about today. First, welcome to the podcast, the Undersheriff of York County, the second man in charge here, and my boss, Major Robbie Hudgins. Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, and the next guest we have here, the man that needs little introduction, as he smiles, the man, the myth, the legend, K-9 retired Sergeant Randy Clinton.
Thank you, sir.
Glad you're here, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, and we're going to talk about this today. And Brent first served at the Rock Hill PD for about a year and then joined the Sheriff's Office in July 1st of 1991. And he had been with our agency just for about 18 months before all this happened that we're about to talk about. And so let's start the night of the 25th. It was football Friday night. Games were playing everywhere in Rock Hill. There's one at District 3 Stadium. I'm sure there was football games everywhere in Fort Mill all the way to Chester. But while that was going on, events in Charlotte were taking place at 8:23 when two men carjacked two students from their Buick car off of Monroe Road in Charlotte. And today that kind of information would have been shared all over, but back in 1992, that was not the case. So first, before we get moving on into the events of the night, Major, where were you starting at 8:23, if you can recall, that night of September 25th? I know it might be hard, but where were you?
Well, actually, that particular night, Trent, I'll never forget it. I was riding down Dave Lyle, headed into Rock Hill. I was in my patrol unit. I was a lieutenant at the time in Criminal Investigations Division, and this is the odd part of it. I actually passed Brent on Dave Lyle. He was headed toward 77. Of course, I was headed into Rock Hill. Mm-hmm. And he noticed my car, and I particularly noticed him. We waved at each other going down Dave Lyle. Mm-hmm. And so after that, I took care of the business that I had going on in Rock Hill and returned home. And I hadn't been home very long. And then, of course, we received notification that one of our officers had been shot on Dave Lyle Blvd.
Mm. And Randy, where were you the same night, before all this happened? 8:23, if you can recall, before all the events took place.
I was out on an armed robbery on Spring Hill Farm Road in Fort Mill, and at that point I was clearing up from it, and I headed back to the house, and I haven't been home probably 25-30 minutes when I received a phone call from dispatch.
So you were both had the same night, nothing, just a normal everyday. I know law enforcement's not every night's normal, but you were just nothing was out of the ordinary, just other than doing your job.
Yes, sir. That's it.
And same for you, Major. Just
That's correct.
okay.
Yep.
So, but then just before 10:30, the same two men. We'll mention their names here in a little bit, but the same two men made their way to Rock Hill, and then there was a report that they entered a business in Rock Hill, tried to rob it. Is that right?
That was the indication that they may have been trying to rob it.
They were trying to rob a store in Rock Hill. They had been in Charlotte, traveled all the way to Rock Hill, and somebody said they tried to rob the store.
Actually, Trent, it was a movie theater.
A movie theater. That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
That's right. Somebody told me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And but then at 10:39, 9 minutes later, Deputy McCants stops that stolen Buick on Dave Lyle Blvd for what people say a headlight.
No headlights.
No headlights on.
That's correct. No headlights. In fact, one of the suspects that we'll talk about in a little bit made the statement that that's why the officer stopped him.
It wasn't just one headlight out. It was both headlights. Just
Yeah,
one.
they didn't have lights on
at all.
at all.
Yeah,
And-
when they left the movie theater, they didn't turn the headlights on. When they left the movie theater, they didn't turn the headlights on when they got back in the car.
They just left them off.
Left them off.
So, stops the car. Didn't think anything of it. It was just one normal. We hate to say it in law enforcement. There's no such thing as a normal, routine traffic stop. But for the lack of a better term for our listeners, this should have been, hey, you forgot to turn your lights on. I mean, you could be on your way.
Yes, with a verbal warning.
Yeah. We actually have audio of the traffic stop right here. Then once that went out, we have audio from a passing citizen that you'll hear right here. And now, Major, we just heard that. What can you tell us about what happened at that?
They were actually two sisters who were coming from Louisville, leaving a football game, and they got off on 77 onto Dave Lyle and headed into Rock Hill. Were going home. And when they were coming down Dave Lyle, they noticed the patrol car with the blue light on, and they noticed a car in front of it. And as they got closer, they realized that there were two black males who were over something, they said, in the road, and they stopped. So when they stopped, the black males got back into their vehicle and sped off. Mm-hmm. And then they came over and realized that it was an officer. And one of the females got on the radio and, of course, said, "Mayday, mayday, mayday." And that kind of put everything into motion.
Oh, my gosh. And just to bring this into some clarity here, Dave Lyle Blvd back in 1992 isn't the same Dave Lyle Blvd as it was today. It was a 2-lane road, right?
Yes, it's now it's so built up in that area.
It didn't have lights or anything like that. I mean, I remember, but for folks, it was just a road, right?
Yeah, it's just plain exit. Yeah.
Yeah. It was actually still a 4-lane.
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't lit up like it was. There wasn't as many businesses around.
Mm-hmm. There was an old lumber yard across the road. What was that?
Dave Lyle
Lumber.
Yeah.
Builders.
Yeah, Builders. Yes, it was.
I was saying. So let's start from there. You know, we have the Mayday out on the radio. What happens now, Major? What's going on now?
Well, eventually I found out who the officer was, and it was Brent.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started going to different locations to set up a perimeter or to get in that area. And basically I was out with some other officers. So we were just doing all we could to set up a good perimeter because there was some indication that where they may be in the North Cherry Road area, mm-hmm. because the vehicle had been seen at the Holiday Inn.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Randy,
the old Holiday Inn. Now it's a different motel, but it was
Ramada
right
Inn
there.
or something. That
Ramada.
Same one right there off I-77. You can see it from the interstate.
Correct.
Yeah. So that I think that it was a civilian that just happened. One had a scanner, right? It was a civilian had a scanner and heard
fireman.
A fireman.
That's correct. Yes, a fireman.
Just happened to hear what was going on. Got a description of the car and said, "Hey, this is where I see him." Right.
Correct.
They jumped out and ran from that point.
Say it again, Randy.
They jumped out and ran from the point where he's last seen them at the hotel.
And that's where you come in.
Yes, sir. I received a phone call from dispatch in reference to officers been shot. Got en route to it. Got our guys from the team that's going to assist me on the track to come. At that point, it was kind of a little bit of chaos and everything of people doing this and that. So at that point, I talked to Lieutenant Alan Brandon. He was at the scene. And I told Lieutenant, I said, keep everybody on the perimeter, don't move nobody, because as I was getting en route there, and just about there, we had one officer saying that somebody said they spotted them going behind the old McGuire trailer park in there, behind some business in there. So I went there, and what we call cutting, we were searching the area for a track with the dog and could not find one. I told Lieutenant Brandon to keep everybody where they was at on the perimeter from that location, not to let nobody move. And that night it was strange. You had police from Rock Hill Police Department, which you had South Carolina Law Enforcement Division here. They was here in the raid team out of Columbia. Sled raid team was here helping Rock Hill on some drug buys and stuff and buses. You had South Carolina Highway Patrol. You had Fort Mill Police Department. You had Charlotte. Mm-hmm. You had York Police Department, you had Clover and everybody else.
Somebody told me at one time there was like more than 100 officers that were just descended on the area to help search for these guys.
Well, you got all them officers, and if you don't have nobody in charge to put them in the places to make them stay there, next thing you know, curiosity gets the best of them, and they leave their post and stuff like that because they want to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. So Lieutenant Brandon, he was taking control of that situation that night and putting them in a position and wouldn't let them move and everything. If they was wanting to move, they had to tell him then, because he replaced them with somebody else there.
Just real quick, everybody, you call him Lieutenant Brandon. He used to be Captain Brandon here. And
now he's over.
The director of Public Safety Communications,
yes.
911 over.
Yes.
Just to clarify for everybody. And he was the man making sure nobody moved, right?
Yes, that was my line of communication was with him, because he knows what I was going to be doing that night, and I know what he was going to do. He was taking care of the perimeter for me, keeping people in the places.
So you get us where in the K-9 world, you find where a starting point.
We located a starting point where the suspects jumped the fence. With the contamination of everybody being there and people being out, because it was Friday night, and there was a lot of people out at the motels and stuff, so we had to kind of eliminate what we could do. So we're cutting it back and forth, and at one point, I guess one of the suspects seen us coming close to him. He took off running. He run out onto Sail River Road. City Officer Craig Alexander and City Officer, I think Jody Long, was with the City of Rock Hill, or maybe with the county, when one of the suspects ran out and they caught him on the perimeter.
That was pretty quick.
That was pretty quick into it, and probably 30 to 45 minutes later, we were still cutting it with the dog, and made a sweep, and at that point I heard that a subject has ran across a backyard, had reflectors on his tennis shoes, was seen going through a backyard, and I was cutting it, and we got to a location, and I shined the light to my left, and I seen the reflectors. When I seen the reflectors, that was the reflectors from his tennis shoes, and I kept on shining the light to my left, and I spotted the suspect hiding behind a log.
So let's back up. So we've got him.
Yes, sir.
But let's back up. You're about to go into the woods. You've done it hundreds of times. You're retired now. You've done it thousands of times. What were you thinking that night when you were about to go? And you just know that you're looking for some people who just shot one of our officers. What were you thinking?
At that point, my thing is not to get too quick, not to get too fast, to pay attention to what's going on. Make sure everybody is paying attention to what is happening, because in that situation, they're not going to get no more time for killing another officer as they would if they just, for killing that one.
So you say we got to do this.
We were on high alert.
Right. And how many people were with you? A normal group?
We normally carried 2 from the response team, from the dog team with us, but that night we had several members of the SWAT team with us.
And so was this back? One of your dogs, was this back when you had Hoss?
Yes.
And Hoss tell us about Hoss. Hoss was one of the best trackers,
Hoss
right?
was a bloodhound red bone cross. Hoss stayed with me. He died when he was 15 years old. I kept him for 13 years and everything. We run a bunch of calls, and he had a lot of captures. But the thing is, when Hoss could determine that it was a bad guy, Hoss was the type of dog that would, on a bad guy, he would get in there and bite him. If he'd get a chance to bite him, he would bite him. But in the same token, if you took him on a missing person and turned Hoss loose, Hoss would find there's like one guy out there on Pendleton Road, we found him. We turned Hoss loose, and Hoss was down there barking. Hoss come running back up there to me barking to tell me where he was at, and took me back down to where he was, and he down there licking the elderly gentleman. When we got down there, he was licking him. But if it was a bad guy, he could tell the difference, and he could smell the difference in the adrenaline rushing and stuff like that. So yes, that was the dog that was using that night, and also was using the little black dog that the sled had called Missy. And we was working on both. Hoss had a little hot spot on his tail, and it was raw. And like I said, we just got through working a call in Fort Mill on Spring Hill Farm Road, and the hot spot was on his tail, because I was kind of not wanting working with it because it was irritating him. So at that point we switched off to Missy, the dog from Sled.
Okay. And so you had Sled with you?
Yes.
Were you on the same track? Or?
Yes, they was there with me. I had the handler with me. See, a lot of times you don't put a lot of people in the woods with you. You put a lot of people in the woods with you. If you overshoot the track and everybody's paying attention, you are the handler. You know what's going on, but the ones behind you don't know what's going on in the dog world up there where you at. They walk in on top of it, they fan out, they fan all around it, they get on this track and everything, they mess things up for you. But you can work it out, but it takes you more longer to work it out, to figure it out. If it's the bad guy, is this the police?
Well, so let's say the names is Maurice Hughes.
Maurice Hughes was the suspect hiding behind the log that I caught in the woods.
And Eric Forney was the one.
Eric Forney was the suspect that ran out, and Craig Alexander and Jody Long caught on Silver River Road. He ran from them and tried to jump and climb the fence on them at that company right there. Used to be old Celanese plant.
Mm-hmm. Okay, exactly.
Yes.
Riverwalk is where it is now. They were trying to get to the Celanese plant, or he was trying to jump the fence to get
right there
to
at the gate when they took him down right there. Yes.
All right, wow. So let's go back over to you, Major. While they're in the woods, what's happening outside? Listening to radio traffic.
Randy's already pointed out a lot that what happens on the perimeter. We stay in place and we try to seal off the area. That's the most important part, and that we do that today. One of the things that I remember about being on the perimeter, that is actually when we received the news that Brent had passed away.
He passed away at the hospital. What my record said, 11:47.
Yes, we
night.
were still on the perimeter, and we learned that he had passed away, and that was very difficult because that was the first time that we had experienced that in my career at the sheriff's office, and most of our career at the sheriff's office. So it was a difficult time, and I know they worked very hard with Brent on the scene. I think that Chief Watts, who is the current chief of Rock Hill, and some of our officers were there, and I think I understand that Chief actually tried to do CPR on the scene at that time.
Oh wow!
So it was a lot of officers that that were on that scene, but of course those are some of the old hats that are still around. But that's what we were doing.
Okay.
Until everything was secure, and then the arrest was made by the K-9 folks and those officers.
Well, for the lack of being graphic, it was pretty bad. Brent was shot. He was shot in the head and the back. I mean, several times by these
what
folks.
Basically was determined is that Brent was trying to possibly get away from him, and one of the shots that actually went in, I forget where, but between the vest, under his armpit, and it appeared that he'd been turned, and he was also shot in the back of his head as well.
Don't need to get graphic, but I mean just to give everybody who's listening that these folks
after he was on
Hughes
the
and
ground,
Forney, Hughes and Forney were
Yes, but
some
that
bad
night
people.
you talking about everybody worked together, departments.
That's right.
Everybody working together. They was working in Captain Charles Cabinets with Rock Hill Police Department with Lieutenant Alan Brandon, and everybody in the Rock Hill guys. They was setting perimeters and stuff like that. Everybody was working great together that night. They was listening, and everybody was listening what was going on. They stayed at their positions and stuff. Once we got on the track and everything, and once we got on him, wasn't long. We had them both in custody.
Yeah.
But at first, it was a chaos of everybody, because I see him here, I see him there, and you get reports. People said, "Oh, I seen this and seen that." A lot of people, got that mentality of there's the wolf, call holler wolf, 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 to get you over there, and then when you get over it, there's nothing there. So that way we maintained our perimeter that night, and the officers worked great together, and they listened to what was going on, and hey, that was the result. We got both of them.
And you said major. I mean, it was.
Yeah. So I just want to point out, actually, the Rock Hill Police Department, because it was actually within the city limits of Rock Hill, so they actually took lead on the investigation along with SLED. The SLED agent at that time was another person that everyone knows, and it was Bruce Bryan. He was a SLED agent at that time.
There you go.
Our previous sheriff. So it's, as Randy said, everybody worked good together.
So let's back up just a hair. We'll go back to the scene. The first my notes say the first officer was there like within a minute after the Mayday went out on the radio. And you said the two sisters were driving by, and you said that they saw everything going on. I mean, somebody said that they were the two guys, Hughes and Forney, were like trying to take his gun?
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
The two sisters observed them. They said that they were like pulling on the officer. So, and they were trying to tug on him. It was determined later they were actually trying to pull out his gun, but we had transitioned over to a new style holster, and they didn't know how to get the gun out.
Right.
However, they did take some other things, and I think that we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that were recovered.
So these guys probably knew what they were doing. They were trying to take his gun and all sorts of stuff. But
that is right.
Then they saw somebody coming, those two ladies and sisters, and then they just took off.
They fled, yes.
All right. So first guy's in custody over there by old Celanese plant.
That was Eric Forney.
That was Eric Forney. And then how long between the two did it take to find the second guy? Was it pretty quick, or it was like an hour, 2 hours?
It was pretty quick. It was 20 or 30 minutes. I mean, because we all, right there, that section is Wilkerson Road, Silver River Road. It's nothing but a finger in there. It's nothing but a little patch of woods. And on the backside, you go around the curve on Wilkerson, you got the road split right there, and then you got the Silver River right there, and you got a patch of woods in the middle. It's still the same way. I rode by there, after you talked to me about doing this, I rode by there the other day going to the mall, and I wanted to get out and walk over because the scene's still there. I wanted to get out and walk over and see if the log was still there that he was hiding behind that night. Because, they've done some construction in the area and widened the road and stuff, but the yard where we got him at, the house has been tore down, but I was just curiosity of if the log was still there. He was hiding behind us, but I seen all the no trespassing signs. I said, well, I'm about to stay out of there.
Because I'm sure you would have been able to find it.
Curiosity would have killed the cat because I want to know if it was still there to this day.
Well, you make a point. A lot of this, like Dave Lyle Blvd was, 2-lane to 4-lane and was no Manchester there. And then back then there was a big Celanese plant and all this stuff, and all this growth is happening. So it's good we're doing this to remind folks that,
You went from a 2-lane to a 4-lane right there on Silver River Road, right there, Riverview, whatever you want to call it, Red River Road, that's what we normally would call it, Red River Road and everything. But it went from a 2-lane, now it's 4-lane. And but that section of wood where we caught Hughes and stuff is still there.
I remember I told y'all earlier when I came, I was growing, I was in 10th grade at the time. I was in the 10th grade and I was on my way to Paces River, the apartments. And I mean, I told my friends, like, hey, they always have a license check right there at Red River and Eden Terrace. And that night I go down that road and there's like, oh, look, I told you, man, there's a license check. There was a license check. And but they turned us around.
So, Major, what Trent's trying to tell us is that he was a baby back then when we was police.
Trent was still wet behind his ears.
Yes. I was a high school student, though. Come on. I'm just thankful to be in the presence of such greatness.
So that tells you how many years we've been here.
Oh my gosh! But it was a long time ago. Long time ago for everybody.
Yes, it has.
But, so Major, let's get back to it. Okay, the two people, they're in custody.
Correct.
But these are some serious people. They once they got into custody, they weren't given up just easily, right? I mean, they were pretty with lack of a better term, evil people.
Yeah, I can tell you this, and as I've already mentioned, Rock Hill PD had the lead on it, and Randy's already mentioned Charlie Cabness. So he was the lead investigator for Rock Hill. Of course, there was a lot of others involved as well. All of those guys did a great job back then. And then Bruce Bryant, who was a sled agent at the time. So they were going to take care of the interviews at Rock Hill PD, and they asked that I just sit in on the interviews because it was our officer. I was the supervisor for investigations on that side of the county at that time, the way we had it split up. And Dean Schillenlaw, who was the supervisor on the western side of the county. But so I did sit in on these interviews with them, and one of the things that I noticed right off the bat, these guys, they were something. That's all I can say. No
remorse, no nothing.
It just each one was pointing the finger at each other. He had the gun. No, he had the gun, and those kind of things. And I remember sitting in that room thinking about what their stories were and what had taken place. And it brings back a lot of memories of that time and what they actually did to Brent.
Right.
Cold-hearted. I'm just going to say it like it is.
I'm sure nobody's going to disagree with you.
No, very cold-hearted. And didn't care about human life, and
because once they got after the interviews and then they were in jail, they did some other stuff while they were in custody, right? And is
that's correct? And even while they were in custody in the Department of Corrections, yes.
Yeah.
Particularly Mr. Hughes. He's tried to escape before. He's still in custody. He was involved in some other things within the prison that just showed what kind of person he was.
So what was the days after? I mean, I know we've had our share, with the death of Mike Doty and everything.
I'm gonna let Randy first tell his side of it, because he can bring in those things about the items that were taken.
That's right.
But then I have some more things to share as
Sure.
well.
So the days after, Randy, you didn't stop working. That's from what you told me, right?
No, the days after, and let me rephrase what I'm wanting to tell, because I don't want to leave nobody out that was there that night.
Most
because
definitely.
the simple fact, it was a lot of hard work put into this, and because it was an officer involved,
right.
So I'm not trying to take nothing from no other department or nobody else what they done. I can't tell you a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes, because I'm in the woods with the dog and don't know what happened. There could have been somebody done something, that they could tell you about that they done that night. I can't tell you because I was in the woods. The next night, the next morning, we go back out with Captain Charles Cavness, and we start working the area, and we find the location where they entered the woods off of Wilkerson Road. I found the walkie-talkie that they took from Brent. Our walkie-talkies have got channels on them, different channels for different departments. Back then, York County was 1, 2, and 3, and 3 was a talk around channel and everything, and 2, and you had your other channel.
Different agencies, different police officers,
different channels and stuff.
So you can talk and work together, right?
Work together and everything. Everybody can switch over and everything.
Same thing today. We could do the same thing
today. And when I found the walkie-talkie that belonged to Brent McCants in the woods, it was on Clover's frequency. They was trying to listen what was going on when it first started, but somehow the radio got switched to Clover's channel, and which Clover was not would broadcast and probably what was going on there at the scene, because all they could broadcast is what the county was giving them to pass on. So they put it on Clover's channel, trying to hear what was going on, and I'm pretty sure that they didn't hear that much.
Because if they did,
they know which way to go, and the operation, they knew where everybody was sitting on perimeters, because you had to give your locations and stuff where you were sitting on the perimeter and stuff like that, because we kept everybody on the perimeter where we knew where they was at.
Right. So you find the radio.
Found the radio.
And this is just to find, because you knew you didn't have it.
Yes.
It wasn't with Brent.
And we found radio, and if I ain't mistaken, we found his handcuffs. We found a couple other items that belonged to Brent in the woods and on that trail and everything, and all that was taken into evidence by Rock Hill Police Department and stuff like that. But they sitting there thinking about, it happened so quick, but they were just snatching stuff off of them they thought they were going to be able to use to benefit themselves.
Right. They tried, like we said earlier, they tried to take his gun.
Yes.
They couldn't get it out because of the special holsters that we carry, but they also took his radio thinking they'd be able to listen to what was going on.
See, when they caught the first suspect, which Eric Phoney, and he was trying to climb the fence right there at backside of Celanese on Red River Road. And when they caught him, and Joe DeLong and Craig Alexander caught him, they put him in a patrol car. And my understanding is that they didn't pat him down and search him that good. And he had a pair of jogging pants on, and the gun was in his waistband when they was fighting with him and got him into custody. But the gun fell down in his jogging breeches around his ankles.
The ones that are tight around the ankles, but loose around there. Sweatpants.
Yes, sweatpants. And they had him in the patrol car. He was in the back of the patrol car. They noticed him reaching down, kept trying to reach down in the patrol car, And at that point, I think Craig and Jody took him out. When they took him out, they searched him and found a gun. And I think it was a 9mm in his.
The same one that they used to kill Brent.
To kill Brent with, yes. They was in Eric Foney's breeches at his ankles, where he done fell down in his ankles. Yes.
So lucky that they.
Very lucky. Very lucky that they did not. He did not get the gun and shoot them through the glass.
Right, because it could have very well happened.
Yes.
Whew. Close call right there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and so you go through the woods, you find anything else? I mean, any of the other stuff like radio handcuffs, anything else? That's just part of the investigation, right?
Yes.
You need to cross all your T's and dot all your I's.
Yes, sir. You know, in everything you look, you have to look at everything you find, and was this his? You got to verify, was this Brent's? You got to verify if that was theirs and stuff like that. And, did this come from Brent's car, or did it come from Brent's persons by it come off of him and everything? So there's a lot of stuff that you had to look at. Rock Hill was there with us, and like I said, Captain Cabinets was in the woods, and he had forensic guys taking care of all the stuff, and everything was fine and marking it. And they took care of all the evidence and stuff.
So, all right. So you did that, and then, of course, Major, you listened in on the interviews, and so I guess we know Brent passed away at the hospital, and so this has turned into an investigation and, some time of mourning. So what were the days like? I mean, this hadn't happened since, years ago in the 1930s with Officer Elliott that nobody knew. But this is something personal, correct?
Yes. So after the interviews were done and everything was taken care of by Rock Hill PD, later that morning, out all night long, later that morning, I received property. It would be Brent's property. They'd moved the patrol car. I think it was Unit 271 back then. We would switch off vehicles, but they brought the patrol car back to the sheriff's office that used to be located on that side at the right next to the armory on South Cherry Road, 529. So his car was there, and I received a Brent's property from Rock Hill PD. I think it was Detective Jerry Walter that turned that over to us. And so we shifted gears at that point because Rock Hill and SLED was handling the other side of it. So we started addressing the issues with the funeral to come and all the property and things like that. So overnight, Brent's lieutenant actually traveled to Lancaster and met with Myra. Many of you have probably heard of Myra McCants, and
if you haven't, you need to meet that sweet lady.
So, so Lieutenant Doug Taylor broke the news to Myra, and that night, and Brent had a brother as well, and his brother had been in a serious car wreck sometime before when he was in high school. So he had difficulties, and Brent would help his mother, Myra, and they took care of Billy. That was Brent's brother. And they had a real difficult time. And as well as Lieutenant Taylor, as he shared that news with them. Back to the morning after, I can remember sitting at my desk, and I received Brent's badge, his brass, his insignias, and all those things as well. And I remember cleaning them very distinctly at my desk, and it just hit me what had just taken place. And it's still emotional to this day. I was preparing those things so that we could take them to the funeral home that would take care of everything down in Lancaster. Brent was from Lancaster, and so we could get that down there to prepare for a funeral. The funeral was held in Lancaster. There was a massive, massive turnout at the church. It was packed. There was officers lined out in the streets. Brent was well known there as well. There was turnout from all over the state, just like there usually is. And Brent was buried there in Lancaster at Memorial Park. It was, I go back to this day when I travel that road, just to stop where Brent's buried.
Where is that again in Lancaster?
It's Memorial Park Road.
Okay.
It's the large cemetery there, and it's right close to the road. But it was quite something to see the turnout at that time. But it is still painful for those of us who were around and participated in that. But even more so for Myra and her family. And so I can remember when they dedicated that section of the boulevard for Brent.
Dave Lyle Blvd.
That's correct. Myra was so proud. I had the privilege of taking Myra back home, and how proud she was. And she said Billy would be Billy, her other son, would be proud. But she mentioned how Brent would be proud too. And Brent laid down his life for the people of this county. And he will always be remembered. And it's always a tough time when you lose someone in your family.
Yes, sir. So, 18 months is a very short time. Did you ever meet Brent before? During that? I know the department was smaller during this time. Did you ever interact with him?
Yes,
Randy?
so Brent tried out for the dog team. We got a response team that goes with the dog team to help us, assist us with the suspect, with the dog, or whatever, going through over a fence or something. They assist us that way, and we teach them in what to look for and different signs and stuff. So Brent has applied for that, and Brent has made the dog team. Brent was on the dog team, and everything when this occurred.
So you knew him. And knowing you had to know your stuff to get on the dog team.
Yes,
right?
He was at training that Wednesday before that Friday that he got killed.
What was his personality like? It was, I've hung out with y'all up in Kings Mountain every now and then. It's fun, lighthearted, but it's business too.
You got your moments when everything is real serious and everything, and you trying to teach them something, and you trying to get your meanings across to what you're doing. And then you got times just where you just laugh and cut up and go on about your business, and just ragging each other and stuff like that. He was the type, he was kind of quiet, and he just standoffish and stand back and everything. He never said nothing, because a lot of times up there you would say something, you'd open your mouth and insert your foot, and then we'd drag you and stuff like that. And I think it still goes on this day the same way. But the thing is, you build a camaraderie with the guys, and because they got your back, and you don't want not to build good camaraderie with them, and you're going in a situation that's real bad.
Yeah,
they might be thinking something else when they should be thinking what's going on.
Right.
And so Brent was on the dog team, and I don't know how long. I think Brent's been on the dog team 6 months, 7 months, something like that. Because I think back at the time you had to be here a year to be on the dog team.
So, and Major, did you have any interaction with? You were a lieutenant, so I'm sure you have some interaction with most everybody.
Yes, I remember when Brent was sworn in,
and
some of the other folks that were sworn in. I will say this: I had some conversations with him. I always thought Brent was a great guy. And he had a lot of friends here at the sheriff's office. He'd been here just 18 months, but he had made a lot of friends.
And prior to that, he was at Rock Hill PD.
That's correct. So he was in that law enforcement family, and previously had served in the military. I think he was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And Brent was just one of those guys that always wanted to be a good law enforcement officer. Actually, there's a road in Lancaster County that's Brent McCants Boulevard.
Okay.
Our road, I forget which one it is.
Where's that at? Around?
It's out off Airport Road in
Okay.
Lancaster County. It's kind of near where his mother lives.
Okay.
Another interesting story, one of the first days that our current sheriff came to work here was
That's right.
the very week that Brent's funeral took place.
That's right. He's mentioned that in the past. Sheriff Tolson said that was my first week on the job.
That's right.
This is the week that happened.
Yep. But I want to say this. We will never, ever forget Brent McCants.
That's right. And that's why we're doing the podcast. I mean,
And we'll never, ever forget Mike Doty.
Of course.
And we'll never, ever forget
Elliot Harris.
Elliot Harris. That's correct.
We're working on never forgetting T.R. Penninger, who was a town constable over in Sharon, but not technically with the sheriff's office, but served. But folks, I mean, I hope you enjoyed this. I know we tried to keep the podcast short, but I knew this one would be long because today, as you're listening to this, it is the anniversary, September 25th, 1992, and today is the 28th anniversary of Brent McCants, giving his life for the citizens of York County, because if he wouldn't have done that, those guys, the way they acted before, during, and after this incident, they could have gone off and robbed another store, injured just a random citizen. So in hindsight now, it's Brent probably saved lives by giving his life, and I hope everybody remembers that. And I hope everybody, when you drive down Dave Lyle Boulevard and you see all the growth with the Target and the Manchester Boulevard shopping area, that you take a second. Even if you go to that gas station, if you head over to the Applebee's, there's another little memorial area right there dedicated to Brent and everybody else who has given their life in the line of duty. So, and when you're riding down Dave Lyle Boulevard, you'll see those signs now that you've listened to the podcast, and you'll remember the sacrifice that Brent gave that day 28 years ago. So we hope you enjoyed the podcast. Major, I know this was taking some time, and Randy, I appreciate you coming in off of your retirement, because good old Randy is living in the lap of luxury of post-law enforcement retirement. And sadly, two incidents, 2 officers that were involved in the shootings, you had a pretty big part of it. So I really do appreciate you coming by here and giving that insight. So thank you, Randy.
Yes, sir.
All right, Major, thank you. And thank you for listening to Behind the Badge. We got a serious look behind the badge today on the podcast, but we hope you enjoyed it. And so if you did enjoy it, please share this podcast with your friends. And the way to do that, you can share it from our Facebook, our Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and even on YouTube. And or you can do it the old-fashioned way. Go tell your friends, hey, go check out YCSO Behind the Badge. They've got a pretty good podcast, and they're talking about Brent McCants this week. And lastly, please sign up for those Notify Me alerts at YorkCountySheriff.com. This is Behind the Badge, and we thank you for listening.